wedding day is supposed to be one of the happiest moments of a person's life. A day filled with love, celebration, and memories meant to last forever. Families gather, vows are exchanged, and the future feels wide open. But in some rare and horrifying cases, these joyful occasions have taken a sudden, devastating turn. These are the moments where happiness and tragedy collided in the most brutal way possible. The 5 worst wedding day deaths ever recorded. In the early hours of May 19, 2004, while much of the world slept unaware, a wedding celebration in the remote Iraqi village of Mukeradib was slowly coming to an end. The desert night was calm, broken only by laughter, music, and the low hum of voices as families lingered beneath canvas tents, savoring the final moments of a joyful evening. It was meant to be a night remembered for dancing, shared meals, and the union of 2 families as Ashad Rakat and Rutba Saba began their life together. Just before 3 a.m., as guests gathered under tents in the desert, celebrating the marriage of Ashad Rakat and Rutba Saba, the sky above them suddenly roared to life. What followed was not fireworks or celebration gunfire. It was the sound of war crashing down on a wedding. Witnesses say the attack came without warning. Aircraft and helicopters opened fire, bombs tearing through tents and homes where families were sleeping and children were huddled beside their parents. Screams replaced music. Bodies were thrown into the sand. In minutes, the celebration was reduced to fire, smoke, and silence. At least 42 civilians were killed, many of them women and children. Entire branches of the Rakat family were wiped out in an instant. Survivors stumbled through the darkness, searching for loved ones, finding only shattered instruments, blood-soaked blankets, and lifeless bodies where joy had stood moments earlier. The U.S. military would later deny that a wedding had been targeted, insisting the site was a legitimate military objective and claiming insurgents fired first. Officials described the gathering as a suspected foreign fighter safe house, dismissing the idea that a wedding would take place in such a remote desert location. Statements were made. Justifications followed. No apology came. But video footage obtained afterward told a different story. One of colorful wedding bedding, musical instruments, and cooking pots scattered among bomb craters and wreckage. The images showed exactly what the survivors had been saying all along. This was a wedding, and it was obliterated. The aftermath was almost as haunting as the attack itself. Trucks carried dozens of bodies to nearby towns, many wrapped in blankets, some small enough to belong to children, barely old enough to understand what a wedding was. Grieving families buried their dead in mass graves under the desert sun, asking a question that would echo far beyond Mukeradib. How did a night meant to celebrate love end in one of the deadliest wedding massacres ever recorded? For those who lived through it, the answer didn't matter anymore. Their wedding night didn't end with vows and dancing, it ended with bombs falling from the sky. The wedding was over. The music had faded, the guests had finally fallen asleep, and a newly married couple had begun what was supposed to be their very first night together as husband and wife. In the quiet hours before dawn on January 11, 2026, inside a residential home in Islamabad, everything felt still, peaceful, safe. Then, in a single violent moment, that silence was ripped apart. A massive explosion tore through the house, shaking the neighborhood awake and turning a place of celebration into rubble. Walls collapsed. Roofs caved in. People who had been sleeping just hours after celebrating a wedding were suddenly trapped beneath concrete and debris. By the time rescue workers arrived, screams filled the air and dust hung thick over the street. What had started as a joyful wedding gathering had ended as a nightmare. At least 8 people were killed instantly among them, the bride and groom themselves. They didn't even make it one full day into married life. Family members who had laughed beside them hours earlier were pulled from the wreckage on stretchers, burned, bleeding, and barely conscious. Others never made it out alive. The groom's father later revealed that his wife and sister-in-law were also among the dead, his voice breaking as he described waking to the sound of the blast and running toward a home that was already destroyed. Investigators believe a gas leak caused a cylinder inside the house to explode while guests slept. The force of the blast was so powerful that multiple neighboring homes were damaged, and one house was completely flattened. Emergency crews worked through the rubble using specialized equipment, desperately checking for signs of life. Hospitals declared emergencies as the injured were rushed in, some suffering severe burns, others clinging to life. Doctors fought to save them, even as grieving families gathered outside in shock. As news spread, the country reacted with horror. Pakistan's prime minister and senior officials expressed grief and ordered investigations, promising accountability and compensation. But for the families standing amid the ruins, none of that could undo what had happened. A wedding that should have marked a beginning instead became an ending not just of two young lives, but of an entire family's sense of safety. All that remained were shattered walls, unanswered questions, and a chilling reminder of how fragile joy can be. In Islamabad that morning, love didn't fade slowly. It vanished in an instant, buried beneath concrete, fire, and silence. It was meant to be a night of celebration, the kind families remember forever. Beneath a star-filled sky in Oyun, Kuwait, a vast white wedding tent glowed with light and laughter. Inside, women and children clapped to the rhythm of the music. Perfume mixed with the aroma of roasted food, and joy hung thick in the air. Smiles were everywhere. No one sensed that within minutes that happiness would turn into horror. On the evening of August 15th, 2009, the celebration was suddenly ripped apart. Flames erupted without warning, racing across the fabric of the tent as if it were fuel. Panic exploded just as fast. The tent had only one exit. There were no safety measures, no fire extinguishers, no second chance. In less than 3 minutes, the entire structure was an inferno. People trapped inside screamed and clawed at the tent walls, desperately trying to escape. Mothers searched frantically for their children as smoke choked the air. Guests outside rushed forward to help, only to be driven back by unbearable heat. The temperature inside soared to unimaginable levels, and visibility vanished under thick, toxic smoke. When the fire finally burned itself out, there was nothing left but scorched metal, ashes, and bodies that never made it out. 57 people were killed. Nearly 90 more were injured. Many victims were burned so badly they could only be identified through dental records or DNA. It became the deadliest civilian disaster Kuwait had experienced in over 40 years. The nation was left stunned, searching for answers to how a wedding could end like this. Then the truth came out. This was no accident. Investigators revealed that the fire had been deliberately set. A 23-year-old woman, Nasra Yusuf Mohammed Al-Anazi, had approached the tent, poured gasoline at its entrance, and ignited it. She didn't panic. She didn't run. She watched as the flames swallowed everyone inside. Nasra wasn't a stranger to the wedding. She was the groom's first wife. Polygamy is legal in Kuwait, and that night her husband was marrying a second woman. But what followed wasn't heartbreak. It was rage. Nasra waited until the women and children were gathered inside their section of the tent. Then she struck, turning celebration into slaughter. She was arrested the next day and initially confessed. But when her trial began in October 2009, her story shifted. She claimed her confession was forced. She said she had suffered mental illness since childhood. Later, she insisted she hadn't used gasoline at all, claiming she had poured cursed water as part of a black magic ritual. It wasn't arson, she said. It wasn't murder. It was superstition gone wrong. The court rejected every excuse. Her husband testified against her. A household maid confirmed her violent anger. After months of hearings and psychiatric evaluations, the verdict came in March 2010. Nasra Yusuf Mohammed Al-Anazi was found guilty on 57 counts of premeditated murder and deliberate arson. She was sentenced to death. Years later, on January 25, 2017, she was executed at Kuwait's central prison. 7 people were put to death that day. But for the families who lost mothers, daughters, sisters, and children, no sentence could bring peace. That night in Oyun still lingers in memory. A wedding meant to mark the start of a new life, instead ended in smoke, screams, and unimaginable loss. What should have been a symbol of unity became an act of vengeance, so ruthless that time itself has failed to dull its horror. Weddings are meant to unite families. This one destroyed them forever. On the night of September 27, 2023, the Al Haytham wedding hall on the outskirts of Qaraqosh, in Iraq's northern Nineveh province, was overflowing with joy. The bride and groom stepped onto the dance floor for their first dance as guests clapped, cheered, and raised their phones to capture the moment. Music pulsed through the hall. Lights shimmered. Indoor fireworks burst upward in a planned display meant to crown the night with spectacle. Then everything went wrong. Sparks shot higher than intended, striking the ornate ceiling above. Within seconds, flames ignited around the chandelier, racing across the roof as if the building itself were fuel. What began as celebration froze into disbelief, then panic erupted. Burning fragments fell from above. The ceiling's plastic panels, cheap, decorative, and dangerously flammable, ignited instantly. Thick, black smoke poured through the hall, swallowing the air. The music cut out. Screams replaced laughter as guests scrambled, coughing, blinded, desperate to escape. I saw the fireworks hit the ceiling, and suddenly the entire hall was on fire, said 17-year-old Rania Wad, who survived with burns on her hand. Many around her never made it out. The bride and groom managed to escape, both badly burned, but the fire devastated their families. The bride lost 3 brothers, uncles, and young cousins in the flames. The groom lost his mother. Survivors described scenes so horrific they struggled to speak about them. "I have a friend whose entire family died," one man said. "His wife, his children, all gone. It's a human catastrophe." Witnesses said the fire broke out sometime between 10 and 10:45 p.m. One of the fireworks hit the roof, a guest recalled. Everything caught fire and started falling on people's heads. In the chaos, the hall's owner cut the electricity, believing a short circuit was to blame. Instead, the building plunged into darkness, trapping terrified guests in smoke-filled confusion with no clear exits. The hall had been designed for 500 people. Nearly twice that number had been packed inside. There were no emergency exits. As the fire spread, the roof collapsed, burying guests beneath flames and debris. Some escaped through sheer luck or quick thinking. Many did not. Firefighters arrived, but the inferno had already consumed the hall. Outside, ambulances raced through the streets as hospitals filled with burn victims. Blood donation lines stretched long into the night as communities rushed to help however they could. The death toll climbed past 100. Estimates ranged from 107 to 114, with more than 150 injured, many critically. Children were among the dead. Survivors arrived at hospitals wrapped in bandages, burned, shaking, and traumatized. Investigators later confirmed the ceiling was lined with highly flammable sandwich panels. A fire safety expert summed it up grimly. "These fires are completely preventable, but no one takes safety seriously until after the dead are counted." The Iraqi Interior Minister labeled the disaster 100% accidental, blaming the indoor fireworks. But negligence told the deeper story. Overcrowding, unsafe materials, blocked exits, and ignored regulations turned a single spark into mass death. 14 people were arrested, including the hall owner and those responsible for the fireworks. Several local officials were removed from their posts. The Prime Minister promised severe punishment. 3 days of national mourning followed. Qaraqosh, once Iraq's largest Christian town and still healing from the trauma of ISIS occupation, was forced to bury entire families yet again. Outside morgues, mothers cried, fathers clutched photos, and survivors searched for loved ones who would never return. "I'm waiting for the bodies of my daughter and my 3 grandchildren," said one grieving grandmother. Another man said he saved his grandson, but lost his wife. Amid the ashes stood the bride and groom, their faces scarred, their future shattered before it could begin. For more than 100 guests, that night was their last. What should have been a celebration of love became one of Iraq's deadliest wedding tragedies, a brutal reminder of how carelessness and greed can turn joy into devastation in a matter of seconds. It was Thursday, September 25, 2025, in Aswan, Egypt, and the wedding hall was alive with excitement. 28-year-old Ashraf Abu Hakam stood surrounded by family, friends, and the woman he had just married. The decorations shimmered under bright lights, music echoed through the room, and laughter spilled from every corner. Just a day earlier, these same people had gathered to celebrate his engagement. Now, Ashraf was a husband, stepping into what everyone believed would be a joyful new chapter. Those who knew him described him as endlessly positive, a man who laughed easily, made plans constantly, and lifted the mood of every room he entered. Egyptian weddings are rich with tradition, and Ashraf's was no exception. Henna ceremonies, festive processions, prayers, food, dancing. It was all there. Guests talked, ate, and celebrated as the band played on. Then Ashraf and his bride moved to the center of the hall, each holding a sidesy stick, the wooden pole used in the traditional Tarib dance of Upper Egypt. It was a proud cultural moment, a dance passed down through generations, blending rhythm, movement, and strength. The couple smiled as the sticks spun through the air, their steps confident and joyful. Applause filled the room. Everything felt perfect, until it suddenly wasn't. As Ashraf turned mid-dance, he stepped backward. Witnesses later said they saw something change, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face. Then, without warning, his body swayed. Still holding his wife's hand, he collapsed, falling hard onto his back. Confusion swept through the hall. Some thought he had slipped. Others believed it was part of the performance. But when he didn't get up, the celebration froze. The music stopped. Screams rang out. Guests rushed toward him as panic replaced joy in seconds. His wife dropped to her knees beside him, terrified, calling his name. People tried everything, shaking him, shouting for help, performing CPR, but nothing brought him back. Minutes dragged on in agonizing silence. When medical responders arrived, hope was already gone. Ashraf had suffered sudden cardiac arrest. His heart had stopped without warning. He was only 28 years old. Moments earlier, he had been dancing at his own wedding, laughing beside his bride. Now, his life was over. News of the tragedy spread quickly, flooding social media with grief. Friends, relatives, and strangers mourned a man remembered for his warmth, optimism, and kindness. His wife, who had just begun her life with him, was left a widow before they could even finish their first dance, before cutting the cake, before living a single day as husband and wife. The heartbreak deepened when people noticed a chilling similarity to another tragedy just days earlier. On September 13, 2025, 26-year-old Bosnian nurse and influencer Adna Ravcan Omar Begovic collapsed during her wedding in Ilia, Bosnia. She was rushed to the hospital, fell into a coma, and died 2 days later. Like Ashraf, her wedding was meant to mark the beginning of a new life. Instead, it became her final chapter. Her funeral on September 17th drew hundreds, all stunned by how quickly joy had turned into loss. 2 weddings, 2 young lives, 2 celebrations that ended in unimaginable tragedy within days of each other. Families left in shock, friends left grieving, dreams of shared futures destroyed before they could begin. Days meant to be remembered for happiness became final moments frozen in time, a haunting reminder that even the most beautiful celebrations can turn into heartbreak in the blink of an eye.